Time to preach. I've been off. I was off last week. And so I appreciate Wade for filling in for me. Always fills in while I'm gone. Always does a great job. But today, this weekend, we begin our annual August music series. This is a very unique thing that we do in August. This is the third year that I've done this. It's very different from anything else I do from the pulpit. Very different kind of series. So if you're new and uninitiated, let me get you initiated. The way this works, I'm a big music person. I've loved music. I've played music my whole life. And so I like to work in music when I can, when it makes sense. And it makes sense to do so now. So what I do here in August is I choose a particular music artist that I like, that I connect with. And then we do a sermon series where each week of the series, and it's typically going to be 4 weeks long, I choose a song for each week from that artist. And we play the song at the beginning, and then I come back and I preach a normal sermon just out of the scriptures like I always do, but we interact with the song for that week. The idea behind the series is very simple. It's to choose smart songs that speak to our culture and then compare them with or contrast them against the wisdom of Jesus. That's the objective. And you just need to know this is by far the most popular sermon series I've ever done in my life. I've been preaching regularly for over 20 years. I've actually been preaching for 30 years, but regularly on a weekly basis for 20 plus years. And nothing like this has ever gained as much traction. This is a very popular series. Our podcast downloads just spike way up during the August music series. And I think that popularity it reveals something about this yearning that a lot of people have to find a connection between Christ and culture. I'm not one of these people. I don't buy into this idea that holiness is achieved through cultural isolation and separatism. I don't believe that's the way. I don't believe that's fruitful. No, I want to belong to the world as one who believes that Jesus is saving the world. God sent his son into the world not to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be recovered, saved, rescued, redeemed, healed, made right. And I want to be part of that, part of the world that's being saved by Christ. And I want to participate in God's work of saving the world. So I believe this music series is worth doing. Now, the artist that I've chosen for this year is a modern artist who is still making music. This is different from my previous two versions of this series. A couple years ago, we went with Tom Petty. Last year, we went with Pink Floyd. This year, I thought, you know what, maybe we need to switch this up and choose a band whose members are all still alive and currently making music. So I've chosen a band that is still kicking. Now, the name of the band is Arcade Fire, all right? You've heard about me mentioning Arcade Fire in recent weeks. We got a lot of people in the church who are more on the younger side who are big fans of Arcade Fire. But let me introduce you, if you've never heard of this band, I need you to know a couple things. First of all, they've been around for a long time. They've been around for like 26 years. They've been making music. They got a lot of albums. They are also a major influential band. They've gained wide acclaim. They've won multiple Grammys, including for Album of the Year in 2011 for their album, The Suburbs. So this isn't some obscure fly-by-night band. This is a hugely significant, influential band. They are led by the husband and wife duo of Win Butler and Regine Chassagne. They're an alt indie rock band from Montreal, Canada. And Regine, you can see her right in the middle. Her husband, Win, is to our left with the guitar. That's the husband and wife. And by the way, they have made their home in the last few years. They've made their home in my hometown of New Orleans, which is another reason to like Arcade Fire. They got really good tastes in cities. But Win and Regine are the principal songwriters of this band. And I think you're going to see, I hope I can show you over the next few weeks, they are a very smart band. And they write very smart, incisive, poetic lyrics. And they find ways to weave what they're doing lyrically into the music. I think you'll especially see that over the next couple weeks with the next couple songs that are coming. But they're just a very, very creative, smart, artistic band. The song that I've chosen to kick this series off is the title track from their 2017 album called Everything Now. That's the name of this song. Everything Now, we're going to put the lyrics in a moment. The lyrics will be on the screen, at least most of the lyrics. Whenever he repeats himself or ad-libs, I don't put the lyrics on. But you'll see that what they're doing is they're critiquing a culture of endless consumerism. They're trying to show us what consumerism is and what it does. It's hollow, and it turns us into shallow people who all become the same thing and think the same way and want the same things. And it kind of robs us of our individuality. And it causes our relationships to become cheap and superficial. So you're going to see that reflected in the lyrics. And it's very interesting. This song musically, on one level, when you hear the music, it's like almost like a 70s disco kind of feel. Like that remember that old song, Dancing Queen? It kind of sounds a little bit like that kind of beat. So it's got this happy-go-lucky feel musically, but when you pay attention to the lyrics and also especially visually to the official video that you're going to see, there's something unsettling underneath all of that. So there's kind of this discordant thing taking place between the lyrics and the visuals and the music. So without any further delay, I want you to watch this video. I want you to listen to their song, Everything Now, and then I'm going to come back and preach my sermon. But enjoy the song. And when you watch the video, it has kind of like this dystopian, almost post-apocalyptic feel to it. And one of the things that I want to draw out too is you'll see these scenes in the video of these young children at play amidst ugly, rusted out machinery. It's kind of disturbing, but it's a warning. What are we doing to our children as we're raising them in a culture of rampant, unbridled consumerism? The song ends with these lines: everything now, I need it. Everything now, I want it. Everything now, I can't live without it. Everything now, I can't live. Which is kind of clever there. I need it, I want it, I can't live without it, I can't live. And then the final words of the song, the last few lines, we're going to come back to this in a few minutes. But he says, every inch of space in my heart is filled with something I'll never start. The ashes of everything now. I'm in the black again, can't make it back again from everything now. And then the video closes with everything on fire. That's a strong message. And it's pretty easy to connect it with the wisdom of Jesus. Luke chapter 12, verse 13. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." All right, this is somebody praying, let's say. After all, what is prayer? Well, there's a sense in which prayer is having a conversation with Jesus. So let's think about this in the context of prayer. This man is praying. He wants Jesus to do something for him. His philosophy of prayer is this, that prayer is a mechanism I can use. Jesus has power, and I want that power to go to work for me. So prayer is a lever that I can pull. It's something utilitarian that I can grab hold of to get done what I think needs to get done. And here's the problem that this man has. His family right now is in a dispute over the inheritance. I would imagine that this young man is the younger brother, and his older brother, like any older brother in that society, received the entire inheritance to do what he chose to do with it. Some older brothers would share it with the other siblings, and they would always appreciate that. But he wasn't legally obligated to do that. He could choose to withhold it all for himself, and evidently that's what this particular older brother does. And so the man that we're reading about here, he doesn't think that's just. He doesn't see the fairness in that. And he knows that Jesus has a keen sense of justice. So he believes if I can just plead my case to Jesus, Jesus will take my side. He imagines Jesus responding something like, absolutely, I'll get right on that. Go find your brother, bring him here, I'll straighten him out. I'll tell him to divide the inheritance. But Jesus does something very different. Jesus is always full of surprises. Let's continue verses 14 and 15. But Jesus said to him, friend, who set me to be a judge or arbitrator over you? And he said to them, take care, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions, everything now. Everything now is not what your life consists of. You know, the American gospel says that life is a competitive game of acquisition. That's how you measure it. That's the purpose of life, to go out and accumulate. And the way you keep score is how much stuff you have, how much money you have. We are taught this from early on in childhood through the liturgies of advertising. That's how we're scripted. We're formed to believe that the purpose of life is acquisition. But Jesus is going to challenge and upend all of that. And he does so by telling a parable. Let's look at his parable, verse 16. Then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly. And he thought to himself, what should I do? For I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. Everything now. But God said to him, you fool, this very night, your life, your soul is the word, is being demanded of you. And the things that you have prepared, whose will they be? So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich toward God. Amen. Now, this parable is all about the human soul and the danger of doing lasting damage to your soul. The word soul in the Greek is used 3 times in this short parable, 3 times. So the theme of the parable has to do with your soul. Which brings up a couple questions. First of all, what is your soul? Your soul is the mysterious synthesis of the dust of the earth from which you were formed and the breath of God. It is the spiritual component of who you are. This combination of dust and divine breath forms this mysterious synthesis that we call your soul. Which brings up another question, more important question. What is your soul for? Well, your soul is for knowing and experiencing and receiving God and neighbors, both. Your soul is for knowing, receiving, and experiencing God and neighbor. But you cannot separate how you relate with God and how you relate with your neighbor. Those 2 things influence one another. That's why I like to point out, this is why the 10 Commandments work the way that they do. The first 4 of the 10 Commandments have to do with our vertical relationship with God, proper worship. The remaining 6 commandments have to do with just treatment of our neighbors. And your soul, if you take care of it, if you tend it well, like a garden, your soul is what gives you the capacity to know, experience, and receive God, and also to be open and generous towards your neighbors. Now, the rich man in this parable is a fool. And that's not my word, that's Jesus' word. That's Jesus' opinion. Jesus says this man is a fool. But the reason he's a fool is not because he's wealthy. The reason he's a fool is because he fails to pay attention to his soul. His life is consumed with acquiring things while ignoring the condition of his soul. He has bought into the lie, the everything now lie. The lie that life is a competitive game of acquisition and accumulation. So he journeys through his entire life just storing up stuff, filling his life with the acquisition of things. And all the while he neglects to take care of the garden that is his soul. And that's foolish. Why? Because we're not made for things. We are made for God and others. Simplest way of saying that is we are made for love. We are made to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. We are made for love. And life is not a game. And the purpose of life is not to win. Life is a gift. And the purpose of life is to learn to love well. And if we're going to learn to love well, we have to cultivate and develop our soul. And this man is a fool because he gives no attention to that whatsoever. Now, he talks to his soul, so he clearly has one, but he doesn't talk to his soul about God. He addresses his soul not about God and about others. He addresses his soul about stuff. In other words, he doesn't pray well. He's very poor at praying. He doesn't ask God what he should do. Here he has this conundrum. I've got so much stuff, I don't have enough space to store all of my extra stuff. And it might occur to him to ask God, God, what should I do with all of my stuff? But instead, he doesn't ask God. He confers with his soul, and his soul comes up with a solution. Get more storage. You know, we have this uniquely American phenomenon right now. We buy houses, we build houses, and we start filling our houses up with stuff. And over time, we accumulate so much stuff that we run out of space to store all of it. So we start renting out storage units to store all of our extra stuff that can't fit in our house. Did you know that today the self-storage industry is a $45 billion industry? 80% of it is happening in the United States, even though we only have 4% of the world's population. Yeah, I see some heads shaking. See, this parable has unique relevance for us. Now notice it never dawns on this man, maybe I have too much stuff. If he just looked around, he might notice that there are other people around him who don't have enough. What if he were to share some of his excess that he doesn't even have room to store in his house? What if he were to share some of that with people who don't have enough? But that idea evidently doesn't even flicker in his brain. It's not even a possibility. It doesn't even occur to him. It never occurs to him because he's never bothered to develop his soul to the point where he has the capacity to engage with God and have those kinds of God-shaped thoughts. It never occurs to him because God is not in his soul. His soul is shrunken and underdeveloped. If we fill our soul with things, that is, if we fill our soul with the desire to acquire, our soul becomes smaller and smaller. I want you to notice that at the same time this man's barns are getting bigger and bigger, his soul is shrinking smaller and smaller. Inverse proportion. Bigger barn, smaller soul. But if we fill our soul with God, our soul expands and becomes spacious, generous. Have you ever heard that phrase, a generous soul? That's because God animates the soul. If you pack your soul, in other words, if you fill your inner world with things and the desire for things and the preoccupation with things, if you just fill your mind with that consumeristic instinct for acquisition, your soul gets crowded and constricted. But if you fill your soul with God, if you allow the life of God, the Spirit of God, the love of God to flow into your soul on a daily basis through wise practices of prayer, contemplation, scripture, worship, if you fill your soul with God, your soul doesn't become too crowded. It actually becomes more open, more vast, more generous, more expansive. The best people you've ever met in your life are people with a generous soul. They freely give out mercy and kindness and goodness because they possess a vast, expansive soul that has been cultivated over time. At the end of his small, self-absorbed life, God says to this rich fool, your soul is demanded of you. Your soul. That's the theme of this parable. Your soul is demanded of you. In other words, it's time for this man to bring his soul before God for a thorough examination. The judgment seat of Christ is nothing other than a thorough examination of the soul. You came into this life being given a gift of a soul. You were handed a soul. And you journey through life with that soul. And at the end of your life, you stand before the judgment seat of Christ, where there will now be a thorough examination of what you've done with it. Have you grown it? Have you expanded it? Have you become fruitful with the fruits of generosity and kindness and goodness? Have you filled your soul with love? Is it a fruitful garden that's been taken care of? Or has your soul become small, shrunken, self-absorbed, turned into a black hole? If we don't fill our soul with God, we end up filling our soul with self-interest, self-seeking, self-promotion, selfishness. That's the difference between a soul and a self. The soul exists in relation with God. You ever notice that when we use the word soul on an everyday basis, it typically is used in a positive fashion? But whenever we use the word self on an everyday basis, it typically has a negative connotation. Like if I were to say to you, man, you're just full of soul. That's a compliment. You're a soulful person. You are one soulful dude. That's praise. But if I were to say to you, you're just full of self. You are one selfish individual. That's an insult. Well, if your soul is not cultivated, if it's not tended well, your soul becomes a self. You become selfish. Your soul collapses inward like a black hole, shrinking smaller and smaller, sucking everything in, turning everything within you into darkness. That's why Win Butler, in the very end of this song, the last line, he says, now I'm in the black again, can't make it back again from everything now. I think it's the most clever line in the song because it works on two levels. There's a double meaning there. On one hand, to say that I'm in the black again, to be in the black is to be financially solvent. I'm not in the red, I'm in the black. Everything's working well. I'm on the way up. I've got everything now. But there's another meaning there. I'm in the black hole again. I can't make it back again. There's no escape from everything now, from the everything now world of consumerism. Self has now become a black hole. Its soul is being erased. Everything's collapsing in. Now, I'm not saying that a deeply damaged soul has no hope in God. Actually, quite the contrary. But I'd rather not go down that route. I'd rather get to the end of my life one day and hear Jesus say, Ryan, you did well with your soul. You grew it. You took care of it. You nourished it. You developed it. It became generous. It became fruitful with the fruits of my spirit. I'd rather work towards that, don't you? Well, Jesus ends his parable of the rich fool with this brief commentary. He says, so it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, those who fill their soul with the pursuit of things, but are not rich toward God. What does it mean to be rich toward God? I mean, I suppose it could mean a lot of different things, but it certainly includes having a richly cultivated soul, capable of a deep experience of God. You know, God is here. God is all around us. In God, we live and move and have our being. But that doesn't automatically guarantee that you and I are going to have an ongoing, rich, deep experience of God. No, that capacity is developed through soul care, through tending your soul. Because you can go through life, and I'm sure you can all name people that you've known who can go through your entire life completely oblivious of God, completely oblivious, with no awareness of the beauty and the glory of God that permeates all around them. Or you can develop your soul and truly live in an awareness of God's presence continually. That's where I want to be. But if we're going to live in a continual experience and awareness of God's presence, we've got to combat this enemy of consumerism. I'm convinced, consumerism is the greatest idol of our age in America today. Now, I know there are plenty of other idols as well, but consumerism is the Zeus of our age. And consumerism shrinks your soul. It shrinks your soul until it makes it virtually impossible for you to live in the experience of God. And so one of the chief tasks of the church in America right now, as I see it, is to resist the idol of consumerism. Not through scolding, because scolding people doesn't work. That's one of the things that a young preacher has to learn. I had to learn that years ago, is that using the tool of scolding people, that does not produce faithful followers of Jesus. That just drives them into guilt and shame, and that doesn't produce life change. So scolding people is not the way. No, our task is to resist the idol of consumerism by teaching people proper soul formation, how to care for your soul, how to tend your soul. And that's what healthy prayer is all about. Now, the man that opens this story, who's concerned about his inheritance, this man is definitely praying. He prays for Jesus because he prays for Jesus to do something because he wants something done, and he feels like I can use Jesus to get it done. So he prays out of his own self-interest, and that's how most people pray. And I'm just going to tell you straight up, that's not helpful. It's not moving you in a life-giving direction. It's actually just recycling your own issues. And actually, you're in danger of doing further damage to your soul when you just simply pray out of yourself. That's why Jesus warns this guy. Watch out for that greed that's swimming in your heart. That's going to take you down. It's going to destroy you. No, as I always say, and you've heard me say this a million times, the primary purpose of prayer is not to get God to do what we think God ought to do. The primary purpose of prayer is to be what? Properly formed. That's what I teach in my prayer workshop. And I might as well tell you right now, we got a prayer workshop coming up. There you go. Quick commercial. 15-second commercial. Prayer workshop coming up Saturday, September 19th. It's one of the most important things I can offer you as a pastor. I want to help you pray in a healthy direction. We're going to meet from 10 to 12:30 right here in the room. We'll feed you, and it's free. Just sign up. Put it on your calendars. But I learned as a pastor, we got to do better than just telling people you ought to pray. Well, how do I do that, Pastor Ryan? I don't know. Just talk to God. That's it. We got to do better than that. I think there's a way we can help people pray in a healthy fashion. And so what I give you in the prayer workshop is a way of praying formationally. I teach formational prayer that's going to form you in Christ's likeness over time by the power of God's Spirit. God's the one that transforms you. But if you tend to a proper liturgy of prayer, over time, the Spirit will begin to produce fruit in you as you cooperate. So I teach formational prayer, and I teach contemplative prayer, sitting with Jesus. Without the practices of formative and contemplative prayer, we have no alternative but to be formed by the culture of endless consumerism. You're not going to stand a chance without proper practices of prayer and worship, because the apparatus of consumerism is way too powerful in our society. It's the air we breathe. You will not drive to your house tonight without being bombarded with litanies of messages from advertisements trying to teach you to think like a consumer. And they don't spend billions and billions of dollars a year on advertising because it doesn't work. No, it does work. Not only to get you to buy a product, it gets you to buy into the lie that life is a competitive game of acquisition and accumulation. And that your worth and your value is tied to the things that you own, the things you possess, the things that you can shop for. The only way for you and I to have any hope of resisting that is to develop our soul through wise practices of prayer. Contemplative Christianity is the saving alternative to American consumerism. If the church wants to have relevance, this is what it is. We must teach people how to form their souls through contemplative and formative practices so that they can resist the seduction of American consumerism. If we cannot do that, the church largely becomes irrelevant. We look just like our neighbors across the street. We look no different. So this is my message. Let's resist the everything now lie of consumerism. It's what Arcade Fire calls in another song on the same album, the white lie of American prosperity. Let's resist that lie by taking care of our souls through wise practices of prayer. It's not a glitzy message. It may sound boring to some, but this is the way out of the cave into the light.